My name is Andrew Flores, and I'm the CEO of North Texas Consulting Firm. Today, I'm joined by my fellow colleagues, President Danny Pree, CFO Evan Tate, CIO Sven Mividor, and CMO Ramin Inayat. First off, I would like to thank IREM for putting together this case study competition, for my team and I has learned so much about commercial real estate, and we enjoy the process every second of the way. So, for the past 3 weeks, North Texas Consulting Firm was given the opportunity to evaluate Park Plaza and come up with a feasible management plan and solutions to better the performance of the property, in which we believe we have done just that. Through a process of trial and error, I'm proud to introduce you all to the best management plan for 1305 Airport Freeway. Throughout the next 25 minutes, we will be discussing site and property analysis, financial analysis, market analysis, demographics, analysis of alternatives, our proposal, and then we'll conclude with our marketing plan. I would now like to pass the floor over to our president, Danny Pree, to begin with our site and property analysis.
Thank you, Andrew. So Park Plaza is located in Bedford, Texas. This is a perfect location because it sits right in the middle of DFW. It's a 10.3 mile commute to DFW Airport, just a 24-minute commute to downtown Dallas, and an 18-minute commute to downtown Fort Worth. The property itself was built in 1991. It is a Class B property with minimal renovations. It is 135,000 square feet, 113 of which is net rentable. It sits on 7.1 acres and is made up of 4 irregularly shaped parcels. In terms of the construction of the property, it's built extremely well. It's made up of concrete slabs supported by grade beams and drilled concrete piers. The roof was just replaced in 2020, so it's brand new. It is a low slope, single ply TPO membrane. All the entrances and exits of our property are handicap accessible, and the property gets all of its utilities from the city of Bedford. Moving on, we were able to go out to the property and get some additional eagle footage. Here you can see that it sits right off of Highway 121 and 183. This is great because it has extremely heavy traffic flow, which is something Sven will cover later on in our presentation, but it allows easy access for emergency vehicles. Moving to the back, here we get a better shot of Airport Freeway, but we also get to see that the property sits adjacent to Bedford Road. Now, I'd like to pass it on to Sven Mividor, our CIO, to finalize our site and property analysis.
Thank you, Dan. So as we can see, the property is currently zoned as H, which is heavy commercial. The outside of the property looks pretty good. The landscaping contains grass-covered lawns, floral plantings, and trees. The parking lot also has some grass-covered lawn islands. The parking lot has 488 parking spots, which accommodates for more than we receive during our regular business hours. Inside of the property, we have a cardiac cath lab, a vascular surgery center, and a pharmacy. The first floor of the property, the second floor of the property are in good condition. However, as we can see, the third and fourth floor have excessive damage. The roofing tile needs to be replaced, some of the wiring needs to be redone, and the carpeting needs to be changed. Further, we have a FEMA flood map from 2009 here, the latest map we're able to get, and we're able to confirm that we are not in the 100-year floodplain. I'll now be passing it on to Evan Tate, our CFO, for our current financial position.
Thank you, Sven. This is the rent roll of the current 55% occupancy. Many of the tenants are medical offices, the exception being a pharmacy located on the first floor. Many of these leases are scheduled into the next 2 to 3 years. Proceeding to our income analysis, the property currently has a gross annual revenue of $1.3 million. After subtracting the $500,000 in annual operating expenses, the property has a net operating income of $801,000 annually. For our rates of return, we assumed a market value of $9.2 million. This is based on the appraisal district reports and the previous sale value on CoStar. For the internal rate of return, the property starts at 6.8% and increases steadily by 3% each year, with year 5 taking into account a potential reversion. I will now pass the floor back to our CEO, Andrew Flores, for the market analysis.
Thank you, Evan. So, like our president Danny Pree stated earlier, we are located in the desirable market of DFW. This is giving us a 15-minute commute to the Dallas International Airport. And as we can see, our current subject property is located in the DFW region, and we are currently in phase 1 of the real estate cycle. This is per the second quarter report from David Mueller of our market analysis. While we are in the phase 1 recovery, we are currently absorbing past new net deliveries of oversupply from phase 3 hypersupply and phase 4 recession. While being in phase 1, we can soon expect a slight increase in rental rates, while vacancy will soon begin to decline. To further support the David Mueller report, here we have a CoStar of DFW's absorption and delivery rates. We can see all throughout 4 quarters of 2021, we've had a gradual decrease in past unit deliveries, stating that our current submarket was leaving the phase 4 recession. We can see that the DFW vacancy level is currently significantly higher than the United States overall vacancy rate. But thankfully, since our subject property is located in the submarket of DFW, which is a submarket of HEB, which is a submarket of DFW, we can see that our vacancy levels are significantly lower than DFW market and also the United States vacancy rate as a whole. So this is telling us that we should not have any further issues in putting in new tenants into our property as time goes on. Here we have a CoStar comparable report of medical offices. These are all single net leases like Park Plaza. We can see that the average direct asking rent per square foot is a little over $26. Currently, the average asking rent per square foot for Park Plaza is at $17.32. We are significantly below the market average. And I would like to note that the vacancy rate for the overall HEB submarket is at 24.8%. Right now, Park Plaza is seeing a vacancy rate of 45%, which is significantly higher than what submarket average is at. Thankfully, with our plan in mind, we will reduce this vacancy rate to only 5% while also bringing our asking rent up to market levels. To go on with our surrounding developments in the area, here we have a master plan development of Watercolor Front in Euless, Texas, which is approximately a 9-minute commute from our subject property. This development is going to consist of an apartment complex, a shopping center, new restaurants, and a single-family community. We can only assume that this will further benefit to push traffic towards Park Plaza with this watercolor development plan being right off of 121, just like our subject property. I would now like to pass it over to our CIO, Sven Vividor, to talk about demographics.
Thank you, Andrew. So here we can see an HEB snapshot from 2020 to 2021. New businesses, new housing starts, and commercial permits have increased. This shows that the area is in a pretty good economic condition. Further forward, we have the average weekly wages in the Tarrant County area. The average weekly wages in the Tarrant County area are greater than $1,300 a week, which is one of the highest in the DFW area as a whole. In addition to this, from 2021 to 2022, we've seen unemployment go from 5.4 to 3.9%. Going on to the next slide, we can see our projected employments. Because the number is above zero, we can see the DFW MSA is continuing to add jobs. Though the jobs are being added at a slower rate, this should not have a material impact on the value of a property. Going further, we have our median household income. In a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius, the median household income is $70,000, $75,000, and $80,000. This is very beneficial to us as it shows that in the close area to our property, we have people who will be able to afford medical services and who want medical services. Going further, we have the per capita personal income in the DFW MSA. It's been trending upward since 2005, and we assume that this trend will continue as time goes on. Going forward, we have our traffic count. We have about 142,000 cars which pass within 1 mile of our property every day. This is very likely due to the fact that we're right off Highway 121, and as our CEO mentioned, in a prime location. Going further, we have here our DFW MSA population trend. The population has been skyrocketing in the last decade. As I've said earlier, we're in a prime market and more people want to be involved. We assume that the trend will continue in this direction as time goes on. Going further here, we have our age and sex distribution. We can see that we have over 1 million people who are 65 or over in the DFW area who need medical services. In addition to that, 24% of the people living in the DFW area are between the ages of 40 and 59, which is also a market that we'll be able to target with this building. I'd like to pass it back to our CEO, Andrew Flores, for analysis of the alternatives.
Thank you, Sven. So, over the past 3 weeks of our evaluation of Park Plaza, we have had multiple considerations, some more feasible than others. One of them was a construction of a right-hand turn lane for easier access into our property, but soon we discovered that long-term construction costs would be more costly than beneficial. 2, we would like to consider the fact to add an additional cell tower on the roof of the building because we found out that this will generate miscellaneous income that Park Plaza is currently missing. 3, we would like to sell the hard corner for development, and we found out that this would help contribute to our renovation costs. And lastly, the development for extra parking. Once we sell the hard corner and we have the development in place, we found out that we will no longer meet the city parking ordinance. So we found a solution to maintain the ordinance of 1 parking spot per 250 square feet. Going on, here's our planned development. It's a 1 acre hard corner, approximately 45,738 square feet. We've received an LOI from commercial real estate brokerage, Rex Real Estate, and we are thankful enough to hear back from agent Robert Wyman. Mr. Wyman informed us that the fair market value for the 45,738 square foot lot is at $20 per square foot, coming out to $915,000. To further benefit us, we have received an LOI from Star REIT, they are considering to purchase this property. They informed us that they are willing to give us an above-market offer of $22 per square foot, coming out to $1 million, for the planned development of an urgent care center. As we can see, from Highway 26 and northbound on Highway 121, there is a current need for demand for an urgent care center for Park Plaza, in which we will fill that demand. We will be targeting the northwestern quadrant of this corridor, and we can only assume that with the development of an urgent care center on that hard corner, this will further benefit Park Plaza by bringing in more traffic into our medical office building. Right now, Park Plaza is currently sitting at 488 parking spots. The parking lot to meet the city ordinance only needs 454 spots. So, with post-development, we found out that would put us down to 406 parking spots, and we will no longer be meeting the city ordinance. So, we looked towards the northwest corner of the property, and we found in this general area that we were able, for the 15,681 square feet available, we could put in around 60 spots. The reason why we chose 60 spots is because if we filled it in with the 88 spots that we could do with this development, we would have to tear down the monument sign, and we're doing 60 so we can preserve canopy reservation on this lot. So for our proposal, our overall management plan was to identify the concerns of Park Plaza and present a solution to maximize the value of the property and increase the tenant sales per square foot, which has led us to 4 main proposals. 1, we're going to be addressing the landscaping of the property. 2, building renovations for both interior and the exterior part of the building. 3, we're going to propose a series of new tenants to solve the main issue of Park Plaza by reducing the 45% vacancy level that it's currently at to only 5%. And 4, the sale and the development of the hard corner to help produce more traffic into our medical office building. I would now like to pass it over to our president, Danny Pree, to further elaborate on our renovation costs.
Thanks, Andrew. So I first off like to start on our landscaping. Here you can see that our parking lot is not in good condition. It is drivable, however, we would like to repave and restripe the entire lot to give the property a better look. The grounds and the greenery at the front of the property are in good condition, however, it can use some cleanup, and we'd like to increase the floral decoration just to make the entrance pop a little bit. Moving on, we were able to get a construction bid from Northcrest Construction. They're a general local contractor in Denton, Texas. They proposed a renovation plan of around $4 million for the exterior and interior renovation of the property. I'd like to go ahead and break this down a little bit for you, starting from the exterior building to the interior. From the exterior of the building, like I stated, we will be renovating the parking lot, but on our many visits to the property, we did notice there was many windows on the outside that were cracked, so those will need to be replaced. Going into floor 1 and 2, these renovations are going to be identical. What we're going to be doing here is ripping up all carpeting and replacing it with vinyl flooring, replacing all current ceiling tiles with new acoustic tiles and a new grid, also ripping up all current hallway and office wallpaper and adding paint and texture to the walls. And lastly, we're going to be reconnecting all electrical after the ceiling remodel. So I think it is important to note that on the first floor, we have 4 elevators. These elevators do have different flooring than the hallway, so we are going to be matching that with the vinyl flooring. They also have brass doors, which are a little out of date, so we want to renovate it with silver doors to give it a more modern appearance. For floors 3 and 4, these renovations are going to be identical in terms of flooring, ceiling repair, and walls. However, we are going to be demoing all the office walls. The reason we're doing this is because we want to give these new tenants a white box space so they can customize their business to their liking. Going on, the reason we want to do this for our tenants is because these tenants, they're all franchises, so they allow for many physicians to work in the office at one time, so they can fill up this large space. Going on to the actual tenant mix itself, we decided to go with a joint chiropractic, a massage envy, and a physical therapist. Now, there's many reasons for this. One, the nearest services are around 5 miles away, so there is a drought and a need for these services in the area. Not only that, we are connected to a retirement home, which is 95% occupied, which is a strong demand for these services, considering 70% of patients who do visit these services are ages 65 and up. Also, 30% of these patients stated that when they went to a massage therapist or a physical therapist, they were referred by a prior physician, like a chiropractor. Now, we were also able to get a sample LOI from the joint chiropractic stating that they would like to occupy our 3rd floor space. And now I'd like to pass it on to our CFO, Evan Tate, just to talk about our post-renovation financials.
Thanks, Danny. So looking at our loan amortization schedule, we're going to be taking a loan of $3 million, assuming the sale of the hard corner, because out of the $4 million in total renovation costs, $1 million can be allotted to the renovations. This is expected to be paid off over 25 years at 6% interest with annual payments of $200,000. For our income analysis, the chart on the right demonstrates the income based on the allotted 6 months TI that will be granted new and incoming tenants. With a new gross annual income of $2.7 million and the subtracted $700,000 for operating expenses, we'll have a new net operating income of $2 million post-renovation and post-TI. For rates of return, with the addition of the $4 million, we believe a new market value of $13 million. And after 5 years, the property will be doubled in value and can be sold for $24 million. I'll now pass it on to our CMO, Ramin, for our marketing plan.
Thank you, Evan. Signage is arguably the most important aspect of marketing. And so if somebody has 20/20 vision, that means that they can see clearly an object from about 20 feet away. So the average person can see the average sign from about a 20-foot distance. That being said, the current signage does not necessarily stand out, especially because of the green color. So on the side right there, we have constructed a digital monument sign. On this sign, we have incorporated red to introduce Park Plaza Medical Center because red is scientifically proven to capture the human eye. And since it is also digital and seeing Park Plaza Medical Center in this color is going to capture your attention, you will continue to read the rest of the sign and see what tenants that we have to offer. We've also added some colorful floral at the bottom to accompany the greenery that is already there, just to make it pop a little bit more. For the physical building itself, we have also incorporated the digital aspect and the illumination and color, so it will attract your attention from further down the highway. Although our signage is included in our construction cost, we did some market research and we realized that we could potentially charge $200 a month per major tenant, and the signage would basically pay itself off. Moving on into landscaping. Landscaping is very important to the consumer's first impression. That being said, as Danny mentioned, even though the property is beautiful with the green landscaping around, we do propose at the front of the actual building itself adding some beautiful floral to further help the property look brighter, livelier, and more aesthetically pleasing. Moving on, we did decide that the senior center would be our strongest audience. It is 95% occupied and closest to the property. And so we went out personally and we conducted a survey, and we targeted an audience that is closer in age to the senior center. And we found out that 95% of senior citizens do prefer a physical advertisement rather than anything online. So to incorporate some co-branding with our tenants, we decided to create this flyer. In this flyer, it would have personable aspects such as, "We care about your health." So it would further build consumer trust. And we would also print this on thick and glossy paper. And because the average attention span is about 8 seconds, we would add visible large logos so that our consumers, whenever they are looking through the advertisement, when they're skimming through as they usually would, then they would see these large logos and they would incorporate these companies and associate them with Park Plaza Medical Center. Our online presence, we would continue to utilize CoStar and LoopNet and further promote our property on these platforms. Another beneficial idea that we had is using Google Ads. Google is known for tracking consumer behavior and their searches. And so we would be rest assured that our ads would be targeting the correct target market. The best part about Google Ads is that we would only pay if somebody clicks on the ad to either give us a phone call or to visit a website. So that's why we went in over here and created a mock website. Over here we have added the home page where you would conveniently be able to book an appointment and be redirected to the tenant's website. Moving on into a patient referral form, since East Star REIT has mentioned in their LOI they will mandate patient referral forms. Because urgent care doctors do have a general overview and general knowledge about major aspects of health. They are not specifically specified in any special issues. For example, if somebody falls down the stairs and they break their foot, like I may not done 3 weeks ago, then they would come in, they would get a general diagnosis from the urgent care doctor, but ultimately they would need physical therapy. So that's when the urgent care doctor would step in and refer that patient over to our tenant that offers that service. This urgent care will significantly increase our market and traffic towards our property. Whenever you go to an urgent care, you go for something urgent. You don't usually go regularly. So this significant exposure would allow Park Plaza Medical Center to become the next major hotspot in the medical industry. Us at North Texas Consulting Company would like to thank you all so much for your time and consideration. And we would like to rest assured that North Texas Consulting Firm is not a cost center, but a profit center. Thank you so much for your time, and we would like to open up the floor for any questions that you may have for us.
What do you attribute the rental rate variance between subject and market? Do you have any ideas on why it's so low compared to what CoStar said others were?
Because of the experience of the 45% vacancy. And so,
Well, I understand that's, so you're saying that the low rental rate is due to the vacancy in the building? Do you attribute it to that?
No, we believe the other leases are gross leases, whereas Park Plaza is operating on a net lease. And so they are charging those higher rents, whereas Park Plaza has that. We assume it's a single net because it just says net lease on the rent roll.
So operating expenses are the variance between the base rental rate and what is in the market on CoStar?
No, it would be just how the leases are structured in the different properties that attributes to the difference in lease structure.
I understand that. Let me rephrase it. Why is the subject property commanding a lower rent rate than other properties in the market? What's the difference? Are the ages of the property similar? Are the conditions of the property similar? Why are you able to get $26 a square foot at other properties in the market, but we're only at 17 as an average rental
I
rate?
think a big contribution to this would be the damage to the property. All the ceiling tiles have water damage, carpeting, walls, they all have damages in the property. As you saw from the photos that referenced at the beginning, a lot of the offices that are vacant in the top, they have wires hanging out of the ceilings. They're completely vacant, they're all damaged, and they're not ready for a tenant to move in. So I think that would be a good contribution to why the rates are so low compared to other properties that are higher conditioned.
So if you had market-ready spec space,
Mm-hmm.
you feel you could command a higher rental rate?
Absolutely.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. I've liked the signage with the wayfinding. That's very important. The current signage doesn't have that, so that was great. Would urgent care interfere with any of the existing tenants? Do you know? I mean, that would be something to look at. I just wonder. Then, when you're talking about the removal of green space, did you check with the city to see how much green space you have to have on that site? Every site's required to have a certain amount of green space.
We unfortunately did not do that, but with the area that we could do for the development for extra parking, we limited the amount of parking spaces for us to add in order to preserve a canopy reservation, in order to maintain the tree ordinance with the city.
Okay. I'm just saying that's a thing to check. The city might say, no, you've got to have, or X number of trees on your property. I don't know what the city in which you're dealing with requires, but that's something you want to be careful of when you talk about, oh, we're going to pave over this and put in parking spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Excuse me, not to interrupt you. So in reference to your previous question,
Uh-huh.
inside of the property itself, the tenants are a cardiac cath lab, a pharmacy, and a vascular surgery center.
Right.
So an urgent care center would not actually interfere with any of their business activities.
okay, good. Then, the last question that I have before I turn it over to my fellow judges is, when you're talking about feeding off of the elder care population in your area, and you're looking at new tenants, did you check those tenants to see if they took Medicare?
We did not check if they take Medicare. However,
Medicare is very important to older people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I did check with many of like the Massage Envy and the Joint Chiropractic. They do have like payment plans for senior citizens specifically. So that is part of the reason why we did pick them to add as a tenant, because it would contribute and help the senior citizens, but we didn't check if they did have to accept Medicare or not.
Just things. And then when you were looking at your renovations,
Mm-hmm.
the elevators are so important to medical office use,
Mhm.
and one has to be gurney compliant, you can fit a gurney into. So, I mean, I don't know if I didn't hear any talk about elevator renovations or whatever, but those are old and on their last legs, so that was part of your
Mm-hmm.
structural plan.
Yeah, that is included in our construction costs. 2 of the elevators were already renovated, so they are accessible for that. The other 2 are contributed to our renovation costs. I did just detail what we're doing with the tiling and the door, but they are included in the renovations.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so your $4 million TI, help me understand a little bit more of what all that includes.
So, what I didn't get to mention was we have, on the second floor, we have a major tenant renting out one side and one on the other side. That is what we're doing on the floors 3 and 4 to fix our vacancy rate. Our TI is going to be 6 months of free rent, just so they can get their business up and running, instead of just offering them a certain square footage payment, like $9 a square foot. We decided to go with the free rent for 6 months.
So a medical office environment today is running into $80 a square foot,
Mhm.
Finish out.
Mhm.
So you've got $40 a square foot about in TIs, and that includes some of the other spaces that you want to do in the common areas.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure you might, if you have enough, I understand the free rent aspect of it, I didn't see it in the financials, but if that was addressed.
Mhm.
Oh, I can go back to that really quick. So this chart on your left, that would be the gross annual income with that 6 months TI allotted. Then on the right is the rent after TI, what you could see standard.
So one of the things I would recommend on your financial analysis when you're going through that is not just the income, but also break down the capital.
Mhm.
One of the things I don't know if you addressed were commissions to brokers, which is important for us if we're gonna stay in business.
Yeah.
That we want to make money off deals that we put in there.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that you're addressing the capital stack, or the capital that you're gonna need to address commissions for those spaces as well. And then, I don't know if you looked at the existing role of the tenants and
Mhm.
address that as well, but they might need some money to improve their premises. And, there'll probably be a commission associated with the renewal of those tenants, existing tenants as well. And then, knowing that these feed off, I really like the idea of the urgent care feeding back to the providers of services inside of the building. I think that was a great thought and a great play.
Thank you.
But you also want to look at hospital locations, and not just urgent, but emergency rooms and other things that
Mhm.
would feed medical office building as well, especially when you have an elderly population demographic that you're trying to go toward.
Right.
So just a few comments, a few thoughts. The capital plan really needs to be kind of broken out and looked at annually, so that when you're looking at not just net operating income, you're looking at cash flow, so that, when you have negative cash flow, how are you gonna fund that? I know that you're taking out the loan for $3 million to fund the TIs, but, if you do have negative cash flow, when you're putting in all that money and commissions and everything else, you're gonna have to fund that some way, either through an equity contribution or additional loan proceeds.
Awesome.
In your pro forma, how long did you allow to go from current occupancy to your 95%?
We assumed about a year.
I think part of that assumption comes from the renovations taking 240 days. Then tenants could go ahead and move in.
And also where DFW is currently at in the real estate cycle. We're about to push towards expansion, so we're going to be expecting increase in rental rates, and also with occupancy going into absorbing the 45% vacancy that we're seeing.
Mr. Brinky, do you have any questions?
I
I have some comments and questions. I like your idea of the hard corner and selling that and targeting that to an urgent care. I think that's a good improvement to just the neighborhood that you're operating in. I think that's a smart play. And then the fact that you've got the adjacent retirement home. So I think it's wise that you're feeding these tenants what they need. I assume you'll promote that heavily in your marketing pieces with your leasing team. You talked about the canopy parking, and is that going to be reserved? Is that going to be reserved parking for?
It's just
some of the tenants. Is that how you're going to play that?
the tenants, they already have reserved parking spaces, so this is just gonna be general parking for customers coming into Park Plaza.
Okay.
To keep with the city ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
The doctors always get reserves.
They're close to the building, they're close to the building.
So that's gonna be an amenity that you're gonna kind of offer as an incentive for the leasing, is that how you play that?
For the extra parking.
For the covered parking?
Is that?
It's not your most desirable parking, but it is
Right.
covered. So it's a walk, the trade-off is a walk
Mhm.
versus, covered parking in the heat of the summer or the rain. But, so how are you gonna play that though? Is it just gonna be first come, first serve, or are you gonna try to emphasize that in a certain way?
It's probably gonna come down to a first come, first serve basis for the customers coming in, appointment times. But for the tenant wise, they already have reserved parking spaces, gated parking spaces for them.
Okay.
One thing I forgot to say, an additional income stream is you can put a certain amount of square footage of tenant signage
Mhm.
on one of the elevations of the building for your larger tenants.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
that-
ask
that's
about
a good-
the
that's a good
consideration.
income
We didn't
stream
think about
for your signage.
Uh-huh.
So did you check the leases to see that they don't already have a right to have a sign? I mean, you spoke about having $200.
That wasn't
But can
provided.
you really
Yeah,
get
they
$200 for
There-
your
Access.
We didn't have
They
it on
didn't
the
have access.
roll.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we weren't able
Okay.
to speak with any tenants when we
Mhm.
walked through the building.
That's something you couldn't.
I like the digital sign though. I think
Thank
that's-
you.
That was
Yeah,
smart.
the additional
Good
income was,
change and-
we would assume the 200 rent and then also the additional income from the cellular tower we wanted to provide over the building.
And just,
Yeah.
changing the color of your signage makes
Mhm.
the whole building look renovated.
It makes it a
Yes,
lot more
we agree.
visible.
Yes.
It does.
You're right.
It does.
Good job.
You know,
Thank
the
you.
marketing side, I would probably look at the sign that you had on top and look at it, say, would it be better to have the building identified or a major tenant?
Mhm.
Because the city's only gonna allow you so much signage, and so, from a tenant perspective, they're gonna want their sign up there, not your sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could command a little bit higher rent. But going back to Susan's question before about rental differences and kind of looking at the income streams here, we had said that, I think you had said that the building right now is computing on net rents, but I'm not seeing the net reimbursements coming in as other income. So if the building is at a $17 net today, you would think that there would be the corresponding reimbursements for the $7, $6 in operating costs that are in the building. So-
Yes, I incorporated that under just miscellaneous revenue.
Yeah, but if it was, think about it this
Be
way.
like broken
A net rent building, the expenses are going to be reimbursed by the
Mm.
tenants. So if your expenses are $712,000 today, you're 50% occupied, then you would think you would have $360,000 in net cost reimbursements.
Mm.
So you'd have a base rent, and then you'd have your net reimbursements. So if, in this scenario, your operating expenses are about $6, if your net rents are 17, your gross rents would be 23 compared to a market of 26, I think the market area. So the differential between the gross rents are not that much. But I'm not saying that this is a net building, because if that net was in there, then you think your revenues would be up by about $360,000. Does that make, are you following a lot?
Yes, yeah.
You know, same thing as you go down and look at your post year one. You know, if you're converting from a net building to a gross building, then it would make sense that all of it would be in your base annual rent. That you're still at a net building, which I think your recommendation should be to stay net, because that way it's always the tenants that's taking the operating cost risk, but you would see that up in that number as well.
And I know it's hard to project, but typically too, your annual operating expenses do not stay static.
Especially when you're going up about 50% of occupancy.
And management fees, just so y'all know, management contracts are often tied to the occupancy of the building, so, you know, that would increase, but I'm just saying, you know, the more people that are in there, the more times you have to have the trash emptied, the more janitorial crew you have to employ. So that's a thought for another time, but I don't think you had.
Don't forget taxes.
Taxes, yeah, but I don't think you had the detail to focus on that, but just saying, you know.
Yeah, if you thought about your 50% occupancy in the building, you're taking it to 95%. You're going to have more costs associated with that. And also, cities are very opportunistic about getting tax revenue.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're gonna look at it and say, okay, you created, you know, you argued your value down by assuming the 50% occupancy and your cost to get it up to that. Now they're gonna say, you got to that occupancy, your value's increased, your taxes are gonna go up dramatically based on the new valuation of the property. So there's a cost to making more money.
Yeah.
Not that you don't want to make more money. There is a cost to make more money. That's not going to be static.
Right.
I think you had a great plan though for improving the property and making it more visible.
Thank you.
And bringing in tenants.
Appreciate it.
I like the amenity of doing that urgent care.
Yeah.
And really kind of concentrating on your demographics around there. I think it's a really, really smart idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any more questions?
Any more questioning? All right.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Michael,
I'm Holly. I'm Katrina.
And I'm Rayhan.
and today we're going to be talking about Park Plaza, located at 1305 Airport Freeway. So the property itself is around 135,000 square feet. It's located in Bedford, Texas, and as well as Tarrant County. And then it has really close proximity to quite a few other medical buildings. So we have Baylor Surgical Center, we have Cook's Children's, and we have Medical City North Hills. Now, the building itself is a Class B, constructed in 1997 and recently renovated in 2017. It has a somewhat unique kind of layout, so it has 4 floors, but it's separated into 2 towers, so a north and south facing one, and then they're connected by this joint kind of like common area or corridor. So the property itself is located really interestingly. It's on the corner lot, so it has really good access to Texas 121 and 183, and subsequently the toll roads that go across there as well. It, like I said, it has that interesting kind of unique layout, so you can see that there with the skinny part in the middle. But then if you look to the right of it and outlined in yellow, that is another building that's connected to it. So it used to be one hospital, and they kind of divvied it up. That is owned by someone else, and that is now an assisted living facility. And then there's gates on either side, and to the left is our property with a pretty big parking lot. And you can see in the next slide, so the parking lot, zoning right now is zoned H, which is heavy commercial, and then it's also part of this master highway corridor district. And what that means is basically the city of Bedford has placed restrictions on what can be placed near the highway, because they don't want something representing them bad or poorly. So for example, there's a really interesting one, which is like a bakery. They don't want that near the highway. Apparently it reflects poorly on them. So that's a little interesting. In terms of property dimensions, roughly 30,000 square feet of floor. That obviously changes. But you've got two parking lots. You've got the massive one to the left, and then you've got a small, tiny one that's split up in half on the top of the property on the north side. So around 488 parking lots, a couple ADA spaces. And then the property itself, so we can kind of look, the far right is the entrance of the property. The two other ones are the waiting area and lobby. They're completely functional, but a little outdated with the kind of brass or gold color. So that obviously is something we would look at, but I think there's a little bit more pressing matters to address. So we'll see that in a little bit. Now, this is some of the layouts of the vacant units or suites. Now you can see unit 427 in the bottom left. That is more like a spec suite, so pretty open, but otherwise most of the other vacant suites have some sort of previous tenant build out. And so you're gonna have a lot of cabinets, stuff like that, but more so like pharmacy space in the middle of the unit, and it's gonna be closed off by glass and doors locked behind there as well. So our plan for that is just when you bring in a tenant, they wanna visualize the space. They wanna see what their business can do. And that's really hard for them to do with all this stuff here, so our plan is to white box them completely, just open them up, and that way we can get tenants in and they can see what they want to do with the space. Now, in terms of the physical condition of the property and some of these spaces, you can see there's some wall damage on Suite 311. On the fourth floor, there's some ceiling panels which have a lot of water damage. And so our assumption on that is that there's some sort of leaky roof because it's mainly on the fourth floor, and that's causing that. And so you're seeing a lot of bubbling, a lot of those marks. And then on 425, you can see that some of the ceiling tiles have just come down completely and are just laying there in the space. So that we have flooding on some of the lower level properties or units. And then on the right, we can see there's the elevators. 2 of the 4 of the elevators are completely out of service right now. And then these 2 front lobby elevators, they have that kind of brass encasing to fit with the lobby, and so that's something we look at as well. Now, like I said before, our plan is to white box a lot of these spaces. Additionally, on top of that, we have the fire panel. And recently, the fire marshal came in, did an inspection. The panel was labeled as outdated, and therefore the fire inspection failed. And so we desperately need to fix that before we can do any construction or renovations on the property. So that is going to cost around $3,000 to $5,000, and then white boxing some of the space. Rough estimate, we're giving like $40 a square foot just for cleaning, wallpaper, painting, stuff like that, and then fixing some of the flood damage. But that number obviously changes depending upon unit. So roughly around $1 million for that.
So this is our floor plan for the first floor and where we want to make our major changes, adding the retail space to unit 120, which is currently vacant. This will essentially bring in more cash flow to the business or to the property, and the front entrance, this is facing the street, so the windows would essentially become the entrances instead. And then something else we want to add is a retail area to the west side of the parking lot. This would essentially be 20,000 square feet, and then we would also expand the detention pond.
Yeah, so in terms of tenants, right now we have 15 units leased. Most of them triple net leases. We have one tenant who's doing it purely for storage. And so roughly that relates to around 85,000 square feet occupied right now, or a 75% occupancy rate. And lease terms are around 1750 for lease in place right now, average. And then another problem we noticed is expiring rents. There is a significant amount rolling in the next few years. So actually in the next 3, there's 44% roll, which is massive. So that's desperately, we need to address those issues by some of these proposed plans. And then if we look at year 2022, those have all actually already rolled. So in August of this month past, those rolled. And so we didn't have any info on releasing, but we did look at it and we looked at the budget assumptions, and obviously they're gonna be spec, but we just assumed that as well, because there's a pretty high releasing chance based on Remedy Medical's history.
I'll be going over the market area overview. So this is a map of the Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington MSA.
We are located in the submarket, mid-cities, and then our property is roughly located right there. And just a few demographics. We are the 74th largest city in Texas. And then this is just another MSA map. Our population is almost 50,000 in comparison to the rest of our MSA at 7,450,000. Our median age is a little bit higher than the rest of the area at 42 versus 35. Our education, we are higher than our MSA. Almost everybody has at least their high school diploma. About 38% of our residents have at least their bachelor's degree. The median household income is a little bit higher than our MSA at 73,000 versus 72. Our unemployment is also slightly lower at 3.4% versus 3.7. And the median housing price is a little bit lower as well at $375,000 versus $425,000 in the MSA. So this is a desirable area to move your family to, since it's a little bit more affordable and the unemployment rate is a little bit lower. One issue that we are facing though in Bedford is that there's not very much unused and unoccupied land. About 98% of the city is already developed, and whenever we were talking to the city manager, they are encouraging redevelopment rather than new development since they're pretty much maxed out. Yeah, and the majority of the developments are residential, so there's not much room for commercial. Over 50% of the residents commute outside of the city for work. And the main form of transportation is the use of personal vehicles because of the work issue, and also the area is not very walkable. And only 3.3%, about 2,000 residents work from home. And there's also only like a few limited amenities. They're currently developing a multi-use facility called the Generations Park at Boys Ranch. So that should make it a little bit more family friendly with more things for their residents to do within the city.
So this is our marketing plan we came up with, and you have it right in front of you as well. This is a brochure of why Bedford, and as well as new development that's happening in Bedford. One of the main strip malls, I guess, retail is the Central Park, and this is where, you know, most of the population of Bedford goes to dine out as well as entertainment. Another new development that was purchased by the city of Bedford around July of 2021 is about 18.5 acres. They're wanting to turn this into multi-use space as well for hospitality, retail, and residents. Another, I guess, somewhat new development that we added was residential. There's around 223 residential properties being built around the Euless, Bedford, and Hearst area. And then we listed a few things that Bedford is kind of known for. So one is the Old Bedford School, which is a venue place, the Quarter Lounge Arcade, Moxley Manor Haunted House, which is a really big thing there, the Central Pool, which is a community pool, and then being built right now is the Boys Ranch Park.
And so looking at this chart that was provided by the Texas Real Estate Research Center at Texas A&M, our MSA vacancy rate is currently at 22.5%, and it's projected to increase slightly to 22.8 in 2023. And then in comparison, CBRE's third quarter 2022 market figures for our specific submarket for Class B buildings in the mid-cities has a total vacancy rate of about 20%, 21%. And then we can also see that asking rents are trending lower. So right now, the change is 1.6%, and it's gonna continue lowering. And then also with our vacancy rate, we are a little bit higher than our submarket at 24.89% versus roughly 22%. And then absorption rates. This chart was provided by CBRE. We can see that starting in 2020, our absorption rates were negative. And then towards the end of 2021, They started going up, and now they're trending a little bit lower now, but still positive. And then we can also see the vacancy rate also increasing and then starting to decrease as well for our area. And then we did find some comparables. They were not closely located to Bedford. Since the area is mostly residential, it was hard to find some other properties that were in the same situation as ours. One is 1 Metro Square that is located in Farmers Branch. Similar surrounding area, located near neighborhoods and a highway. Their square footage is lower, and they were built in 1971, but they were renovated in 2014. Their asking rent is $14.50. Fort Worth Medical Plaza 1, a little bit closer to Bedford, also lower square footage. They did not renovate, but they maintain their property very well. And their asking rent is $18. Gateway Plaza, located in Irving, also lower square footage, a little bit closer in age. They were renovated in 2005. Their asking rent is between $13 and $15 for their medical spaces. And so our main focus for these comparables was looking at building condition around the same year that they were built. And if they were renovated at all, they were maintained a little bit nicer than our property. And so their average asking rent was $16.25 per square foot. Ours, after looking at our advertisements and listings, we're currently listed at $17.50 per square foot. And these are nicer buildings, asking for lower, and so we suggest lowering the asking rent to $16 per square foot.
Yeah. So, I mean, we did the same sort of thing with sales that we did with leasing comps. We looked at what is around the area, similar use, and a lot of the ones close to Bedford were only 20,000, 30,000 square feet. And so we had to go a little bit further out, but ultimately we came up with around $174 per square foot average. An 8% cap if you average it out. The only other notable thing here is that the occupancy for most of those comps are much higher. So you have 100, 100, and then 87 and 100 again. So, yeah, so then we took that into consideration, right? Our average is 8%. They're much higher in occupancy, a little bit nicer buildings. So market cap rate right now is 7.6%. We put it up to 8 to keep it with the average, but also because our building's lower occupied, a little bit less is nice. And then a couple other key assumptions we got to get to the building valuation was full repayment from tenants. So on the current rent roll, we noticed that it was around half payments for every line item, whether it be expenses or base rent. And so assume that tenants either left or weren't able to pay, but going forward, we're assuming that they're going to pay 100% and we're going to get those expenses. The another thing we did too is we had a rent roll from 2022 of June, or 2021 to 2022. And so we ended up getting the full 2022 budget so we could kind of forecast a little further out. And that came up with a lot of the expense numbers that we have here. They're just trended, and that's something we needed as well. And then base rent, the only difference from the rent roll there, again, is that it came from the new budget because there was a $40,000 decrease in rent roll, or difference between those two, and we just figured we didn't have any escalation numbers for these leases, and so 2.21% was what that difference was, and so we assumed that was escalations. So ultimately, we came up with a building value of around $11.2 million currently.
Our implementation time frame and our solution to this is a 3-phase approach. The reason it's a phase approach is because we have a bottleneck with the capital improvement budget. So our first phase is to convert the lower level offices, which are a bit more desirable and easily accessible to spec offices. As we said before, white boxing them, making them a bit more nicer and more enticing for tenants to come into. Secondly, we would want some retail development on the lower level. Suite 120 is vacant right now, facing the street, and has a nice glass pane. We can leverage the access and frontage that we have from the street to see that, and therefore we can have a really nice, enticing property right off the highway for something nice retail. We're also going to start a retail search for the outside 20,000 aforementioned feet, and try to get something nice there. Again, we have a lot of frontage to play with and use, and we have a lot of access, right? This is a key location overlapping the central business district and the highway district. So this would be an excellent opportunity for tenants to come into and lease out. The fourth bullet point here is probably one of the most important ones. It's a tax increment reinvestment zone. So we have already actually spoken with the city manager, Jimmy Stathathos, and surprisingly, he was very open to the idea of rezoning this, adding a temporary variance of 20 and 25 years to reinvest the increase in ad valorem taxes back into the property to revitalize and improve the property and the value around it. And he's actually reached out to us to set up a future call. Our second phase is completion of the TRIS rezoning. This is a change, so there is hearings, so about 2 years for this completion. We also want to combine the upper level offices into a dialysis clinic. There's a couple offices that are contiguous, and currently dialysis now clinics are filling up quickly, almost 95% occupancy at most clinics, and we are right next to an assisted living facility. It's a perfect place, ease of access and location is awesome. Secondly, upper level renovations. Upper level is a bit harder to access, but still the entire property needs a bit of a facelift. We saw above the property was built in 91. Rents around and comps around the property are maintained a bit nicer. The way we combat this is if we do a whole facelift and a phased approach to the property itself. So upper level is second. Elevator renovations, they are a bit older, so they might need some refurbishing and a facelift on the ones that are currently working, but we don't want to take out the whole thing, so again, phasing this out. In the second phase also, we plan to start developing the 20,000 square feet of retail that is outside, which will be huge for the city of Bedford itself because, as we said before, they are a mature city, so they do focus a lot on redevelopment, and this is new development for them. Phase 3 would be renting out the upper level offices as their spec outs will be done by that time, and work on the interior remodeling of the building. Lots of hallway tile needs to be changed, carpeting needs to be updated, just overall cosmetics need to be done on the property, and this will really, really increase the value of the property. So what is TRIS, right? Mentioned it before is a big thing. Since we're doing all these upgrades to our property value is subject to go up. Right, at the rate it does, it may not be constant, but it will go up eventually. It will go up for sure. So what we do is at the time of creation, they establish a base ad valorem property value. And off of that, we get our base taxes. That tax is constant for 20 to 25 years per the city's zoning and what they give us. After that, the increases are all reinvested back into the property. Now, this will last for about 20 to 25 years and provide a major source of capital improvement for us. So the main benefits of this TRIS rezoning is expedited development. It allows us to develop the property at a quicker rate, which is done because the developer does not need to take and front the entire cost, and it's also more reliable, right? So going back to second and third points, combining them, lower risk for the developer and investors. If we want to go to investors and say, hey, we're developing this in a mature city, we have the city's backing, and we have steady growth, let's do this, right? Investors will like that stability, and with impending volatility coming up, this is a great way to do that. Thirdly, it's reliable, right? The city has its funds coming in, and it knows in the future, because we developed this one area, within 3.5 miles, there's 3 strip malls around it, which the city and inside information from the city council was told to us that they are planning on redeveloping all of those. We also increase the value, right? So not just value financially, but again, value in the community, right? We're working with the city wants to see Bedford grow, and we are adding that growth. We're next to a residential district. There's a bunch of development coming in Bedford. Why don't we help that, right? Make this a win-win for the tenants, for us as property managers, and for the city of Bedford itself. Fifth, it's a tax incentive, right? It's huge. We increase the ad valorem taxes of increasing this property to a multi-million dollar property, almost under $30 million. It's going to be incredible for public infrastructure and public schooling, right? So we invest these taxes back in the city itself, residential area, schools get better.
So with the TRIS zoning, the city would obviously be more involved, and if the compliance issues still exist, this can make it a little bit more costly and delay our time frame. So exposures that we have is proper handling of compliance and flood damage, as well as unforeseen hazards and additional replacements, and some risks we might have is tenant retention as well as building construction. Financing
wise, 2022 we hope to get a refi done for $5 million. 24, capital improvement, get our TRIS zoning redone. 25 onwards, we hope to use our major source of cash flow from tenants, TRIS zoning, capital, and the capital improvement budget going forward to invest into the property again and develop this property to its potential. Finally, our conclusion is that the initial building value is $11.2 million. With assumptions that we're going with $16 base value rent, I'll come back to in a second, with 95% occupancy and a 7.6% cap rate, we hope to achieve $28.1 million in valuation. The reason we chose 16 is because, one, as I said before, we want to make this a good deal for everybody, right? Impeding market volatility means that tenants may leave, and we want to increase tenant retention. Secondly, we also don't have information about TIs and rent increases, so we took a base value rent, and we can always build off of that in the future. And this honestly provides a great, puts us right in the middle of the spread, right? As Holly said, our spread is $13 to $18, and we're smack dab in the middle of that. So it's a good happy medium for a property that will be developed, revitalized, and overall help the city of Bedford itself. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer.
Did you increase your operating expense year over year?
We assumed OpEx grew, right? Because I mean, we have two OpEx. We have OpEx that's coming in from the tenants, what they're paying, and what we based it off of, what's full amount. So that number was significantly lower. OpEx, let's see. OpEx was around like 500,000, I believe, beforehand. And so it was a little tricky because that total recoverable OpEx number, how do you trend that based on predictions today, right? Because we had a little bit past information. And so we ended up going off that 2022 full budget and trending it based on that to that 940 number. And that goes along with what budget projections have been in the past and continuing that kind of trend.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking,
Yeah.
year over year?
Yeah.
For your projections?
So
You
Yeah.
increased it incrementally?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Is your parking going to be adequate to add this retail?
Yeah, so
Okay,
right now,
parking.
yeah, when we took a look at the property, we went 2 or 3 times actually. Cutoff was around right here in terms of parking. Now this was filled by employee parking around, we assume, and then that was really the cutoff, and there was still some empty spaces in between too. So this entire back, like 6, 7 rows were just completely empty. So we think we can definitely put the retail space there. This doesn't show full parking, we didn't add that, but there'd be some right there and there.
I understand, but
yeah.
did you count your parking slots?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you meet city code?
We do.
For both your existing office building and your proposed additional retail per square foot?
Right.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with city codes, we did calculate that we have over adequate parking right now, and city was saying that we are able to meet that still with adding that in.
So if you take away parking, I think what Susan's saying is that you're taking away available parking with your 20,000 square foot development. The retail's gonna need to be parked 4 per thousand versus the 2.5 per thousand in the office medical office building. So you have a higher parking requirement for the retail, and you're taking away the spaces that you're currently parked at around 3 per thousand for the entire building. So if you're taking away parking and you're putting in a higher parking requirement for that 20,000 square feet, does that meet code if you do that?
Right, and that's a very valid question. It's a great question too. So just to explain what it is, and then we'll go into the numbers in a second. Our parking ranges from back here, goes through it, and as we said before, we went to the property about 3 times at 3 different times, my ad, on 3 separate days of the week. Nonetheless, we went at the busiest times of the week, and still the parking wasn't filled. So demand for the parking, actual demand, not city regular demand, will be met 100%.
Well,
Going back to
I
city,
understand meeting, who's coming to the building now, but when you fill that building, and when you put retail
Right.
there, you'll probably need more parking. Do you meet city code requirements?
Right, so
That's
already
the main thing, because you
we-
can't build it
yeah,
if you don't have the car parks.
that makes a lot of sense, right? And so already we already have double the parking that we need, so we will have enough to accommodate for the both retail spaces that we are planning to add.
Okay, we'll assume that you do. Are you losing any green space that is city required when you sell that off?
That's actually an excellent question. So currently the most green space that we have is a couple trees here and there, right? Our
on
plan,
this side of the parking lot as well.
right?
Yeah.
Just on this side, we plan to take away these trees and revitalize this. I'm really glad you brought that question. One of the biggest landscaping companies around here is Delineator, whose CEO is Lauren Fasik. I did talk to her, and she's actually very open to adding more greenery and making a lush landscape area around the parts that we already have it. And again, our theme throughout this presentation has been revitalization, right? So we're going to try to revitalize the greenery that's around it and invite people in more. There's also a sign here that's surrounded by a couple of greens, and we're going to increase that density.
We're missing each other in a little significant way.
Okay.
The amount of greenery that you have in your planted areas is different than the amount of paved versus open land that is available for green space.
Yep.
And the city requires that you have a certain amount of square footage of land that could be green space.
Right.
They don't want it all to be paved. The runoff is horrendous.
Yeah.
So are you meeting that when you get rid of this
Yeah.
front portion?
So actually, where the entire retail space would be is all pavement.
It's all paved
Yeah,
now?
so there's just a
Okay.
tiny space right here, which is the retention
So you're not taking
pond.
away any
Yes.
green space?
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question
Okay,
then.
no,
No.
I didn't explain it very
No,
well.
that's my fault too.
apologies.
But yes, to both your questions, yes, we
Yeah.
do. It is fully paved. Our
No green
runoff will be
space.
blocked by this, and we
Okay.
will try to revitalize around it.
I thought your use in talking to the city about the rezoning was brilliant. Good move on your part. But I have to ask you, where did you get your comps? Because there is a lot of small medical office space in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a lot comparable to this property. So I'm just curious, did you choose them out of CoStar, Black Sky? Where did you get those?
I didn't have access to CoStar. I went through LoopNet and
Okay.
chose the best options through there, and tried to keep it to similar quality, as close to the building year as possible from what was available on LoopNet. And yeah, that's pretty much the best that I could get off of there.
Yeah, I would just caution you about taking comps that are not in your market.
Right, because I couldn't find
They're
anything
just
closer
not.
to it on that, using that resource.
Okay.
The same thing with the sales comps, they were
Yeah.
CoStar, but
Yeah.
sales is very limited there, and most of the sales there were 20,000
Well,
square
I
feet.
appreciate that you looked and you found something, just, in a real life situation.
Yeah.
And, you talked about the hospital being separated from the medical office building. Were there any shared utilities or services, or did you have access to that information?
We did not have access
Okay.
to that information.
I didn't think you did. I like that you prioritized certain aspects of maintenance. That's key, because you can't use your building if you don't meet code. And you can't retain tenants if you don't repair your elevators. The one thing I would caution you about, ceiling tile's cheap and you can change it out. They did replace the roof, but a leaky roof is not the sole source of ceiling tile damage. You can often have small water heaters above ceiling. You can have HVAC lines that leak onto that. You can have leaks in your sprinkler systems. So don't always assume
Yeah.
that a stained ceiling tile is a roof leak. It could be a host of things.
Yeah, I think, we definitely didn't know about we know about sprinklers and
Yeah.
things like that, we just
Yeah.
didn't have enough expertise. That being said, it was just so prevalent that we just assumed it was roof because it was in every unit, every basically
Especially
place,
on
on the
On
fourth floor
yeah.
specifically.
But
Yeah.
they repaired the roof, so
Yeah.
that may be damage that's been there like forever.
Yeah, we don't know.
So, but good job. Yes, it's all yours, guy.
So on your capital plan, I didn't really see a lot of detail relative to how your capital spend was going to be. You mentioned about $40 a square foot for white boxing 3 and 4, I believe, but and $5,000 for a fire panel. But what is the overall capital that's going to be invested into re-tenanting this building? When I look at it and say white boxing, but what about rebuilding it for the next tenant? And you think you talked about the dialysis clinic, you know, which will probably run about $80 to $90 a foot to build that out. And then, you know, your use of the tax increment financing is great, but I don't think that's going to go into the interior of the building. I think the requirements or limitations on that is improvements to the general neighborhood, quality of lighting, streets repairs, things that are common. I don't think you're going to be able to use that inside the building. I might be wrong, but just when I've looked at it before, it's been, you know, those areas. So think about what capital you're going to use. Your valuation going from 11 to 28 million. What is it going to cost you to get there? Commissions that you're going to pay for leasing, TIs that you're going to have to put down after you do some of your other improvements. And then on the retail, parking was the question I had too. So I think you really need to do a deeper dive into your parking scenarios and find out, okay, if I'm adding square footage, I'm going to have to add parking. And if I deleted parking, do I meet city requirements? And is there other available land on the site that I can use, and can I use it and still meet my greenery space? I like your market analysis on rents that you went out and looked. You know, I think you can find better comps, but you're limited to what you have available to you. But, you know, your thought process was right, going in and saying, what is my comparable rent structures, and going from there. One of the things on the expenses that you noted about recapturing those from tenants, you've got to think about your occupancy, and that the reason that you're probably 50% of where you projected to be is that your occupancy is what, below 70% right now?
75%.
75%. So in concept, you would only be recapturing about 75% of those expenses anyway. As you grew your occupancy, you would increase that. But I think your assumption of getting near 100% with 75% occupancy, is not reality, if you will. And then when you're looking at the analysis on the capital and your cash flows, I'd really look at it and say, what's the return to the investor? And look at that, not just the value accretion you have. Well, what did it cost to get to that? And so what was the return to the investors based on that capital spend? If I'm not getting a market plus return on that capital, then I'm going to put it elsewhere. So that's not going to make much sense. You may put money into a project that's going to return me 3 or 4%. So really kind of think through your analysis, saying how much is it going to cost me to get there, and then what is that return to me as an investor as I come out on the exit or reversion of that property. And that's kind of a great job though. I liked your thought process of how you were going through and looking at market comparables, even though we know there's probably better comparables that are closer to it. But the thought process of going through that I thought was very sound.
The approach was good.
Thank you. And could I just add on to that quick point? I think that may have been a lapse on my part to mention this. When speaking with the city manager, so you're exactly right. There are restrictions on how you can use that reinvestment budget, but the city manager just said that generally when you get a rezoning, it does come with extra city incentives. The city is looking to heavily redevelop a lot of properties around it, and that city incentives are able to be used inside the property itself. Those were not listed here because, again, he said those are subject to change, and those require a little bit more sit-down meetings. And like I said before, he has reached out to us to get on talks with that, which is why it wasn't listed here. But yes, TRIS zoning and city incentives will help to redevelop the property as a whole.
And one other comment on the retail, I would have done a little bit more analysis on the type of retail that would be accretive to the neighborhood and to the property itself and existing tenants and the tenants that you might want to put in there. Is there a need for 20,000 square feet of just retail? And is there specific use or deficiency in the market that you would want to address in that retail? 20,000 square feet is not big for retail, and it's how are you going to differentiate that? And if you're competing against other retail centers for similar retail tenants,
Yeah.
it might be a little bit challenging. But if you did something that was affinity to that property or the neighborhood, it could be successful.
Yeah, and with the white boxing that we're doing, right? Let's say we want a dialysis clinic. The problem is, how do we get a dialysis clinic in, right? We don't want to spend that money up front to build out their suite. So our plan was literally just to white box it and then give them TI money to do such. Or maybe we pay landlord, or we split it, TTI, landlord, TI. But ultimately we don't want to build that out and then be stuck with it, let's say if they can't, or they don't want to move it there, right? And then with the OpEx and some of the budget as well. So the half that we saw was because, if you took the rent roll and you calculated what the base rent would be for all tenants and, averaged that out, or not averaged it out, but added it up, it was supposed to be 1.4 million. But on the rent roll, we were getting around 700,000. And that wasn't just an occupancy issue. It was based on something else, because the tenants, if they didn't pay, that would lead to that. But based on the budget and just forecasting out what their actual rents are based on leases, it would be a much bigger number. So we weren't exactly sure why that is. And so that kind of led to some of the assumptions that we made. So it wasn't 100% occupancy that we're really calculating. For some of the expenses, yes, but for some of the other stuff, it's just 100% repayment, because we don't know what happened there, why it wasn't being paid in full, and it wasn't a vacancy problem, at least that we thought.
So your end value is 28 million. What's the timetable to get to that? Did I miss that?
Yeah, so that would be after we're able to complete all phases of the project, as well as getting leases in. So obviously assuming occupancy and getting tenants within that. Now, that number might go down a little bit based on delays, expenses, construction costs are constantly going up. So, that's hard to calculate, but based on 2026, 2027, assuming no full delays of construction.
Okay. What's lacking is a pro forma on how we get from our current, the cash flows that go in, the improvements we made, and then the rent up and the other TIs and commissions over time, several years, so you'll hear an Argus run or something like that. So the building of this is where we are this year, this is where we're going to project, and then at the end you'll be able to tell what the investor's rate of return is.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. So it would have been nice to have seen that. The four of us are more on the property management side as we came up through. We're not on the broker side. We're not salesmen. I appreciate your more conservative, realistic proposal that you put forth, and I enjoyed the presentation more like it was a conversation instead of I didn't feel like I was just really being pitched. So kudos for that as well. I think it was a great approach. I don't have any other questions that haven't been asked.
Thank you for the handouts. That was nice to follow along. And I think your rent roll analysis was good, that you're recognizing that you have not only some risk, but some opportunities that could go either way. So good job on that. The photos of the actual conditions of the property help tell the story of how much needs to be done here. So
Very helpful.
I think that was very good. The handout to marketing piece here is good to tell the story. I like the story it tells of what's happening in Bedford. Where did these developments, how do they relate to the subject property? How close are you to these things, and what impact do these amenities that the city is adding, what impact do they have to the subject property?
So the main purpose of our marketing plan is to, why we're wanting to reconstruct this property, because there is development in Bedford. It's not just, a dead city. There is things going on in there, and that's what we wanted to provide.
Okay.
And also the other purpose of this marketing brochure is, if we're wanting to entice retailers to come in and fill in our other spaces, Bedford's a drive-through town. I used to go to Stephenville all the time, and I would take 183, 121. I would never think to stop in Bedford. I never thought that there was anything going on in there. And this brochure would definitely help with a good marketing plan to give people an idea, like there's other things to do in there. And if you bring what you have to the table and want to fill in our space, we can add this on there and create something bigger.
Yeah, and we also felt the need because looking at the rent roll and like budget versus year to date, at least from what we saw, there was $0 spent in marketing, right? And marketing helps a lot get those potential tenants in. Like, why choose us versus somewhere else, right? And so that's something why we kind of made that presentation, just to help people come in and be like, yeah, I'll choose this spot for my business because, you know, of the location around.
I think what he's saying is you're selling Bedford, you're not selling the subject.
Yeah, but I think.
But
what
you
they're
did,
saying
It's
is
part of
that-
the
Make it
process.
compelling.
They're selling Bedford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Location's everything in real estate, right?
Right.
And that's, we have prime frontage here, but also to get anything done, you need city's approval. And people only want to move there if there's development, if there's something cool there, right? I mean, I live in a country town up north that just got developed, and it's fun now, but we didn't know that then, right? I mean, we don't want to just be a drive-through town where we spend millions of dollars and say, hey, okay, why here, right? We want to be able to answer that question, and this was our effort to answer that question and say, this is why we need to revitalize Bedford, why this property, and why now.
Also, I appreciate how you aligned with the city. If you don't have the city on your side, you can't get anything done. And that's a very, very important relationship to have, especially when you have the issues that this building has.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
It was super interesting because Rayhan here was like, let me walk into the, what was it?
City, like we all walked into City Hall,
Yeah.
or, well, the municipal court next to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he found out
And-
the manager, right?
The
Or-
man,
He
well, the
just
manager
happened
was just
to walk
walking
out
through
when
the
we were
hallway,
walking in,
and
yeah.
we were walking in because we were waiting on a response and didn't get one, and so Rayhan had the great idea of like, let's show up and.
The stalker?
I mean, we just walk in, like they can't tell us no then.
It's just perfect
Yeah,
timing.
that's great.
He just walked up to us and was like, do y'all need anything? And he introduced himself as the city manager, and
Yeah.
we were like, you're exactly the person we needed to talk to.
Yeah.
Everything happens because of relationships, right? Now he knows us face to
Yes.
face. He wanted to call us, send us a follow-up email, right? I mean, who does that unless they want to help them? And he straight up said that, I want to help this be developed. Let's talk. Next meeting, I'll bring it up. Those were his words to us. So numbers and all, if we put numbers and him aside, relationships every day.
And I want you to carry that all through whatever you decide to go into. It is so magical to create those relationships and how it can help you no matter what your business is.
Yeah. And it only works if everyone gains from it, right? So we want to make it the best plan. Like our plan here was to make sure everybody wins, right? We chose a middle rent, but it can change, right? Adding TIs to it, rent escalations, that's a base rent in the middle of the spread that of the comps that we found, albeit they may not be perfect, but they are what we found. And we have in the middle of it, and we want to grow from that, right?
Your method was there.
Yeah, and we want to help the city grow, and we want to do the best for this project, but why not add value to where we can add value, right? So that was our main goal, is just to add value where we can.
Yeah. But those relationships help you find
Yeah.
the serendipity
Yeah.
that you're always looking for in business.
Creates
Another
harmony.
thing to add on to that, they were having their city planning meeting October 21st, and
Yeah.
he
Oh,
was
wow.
telling us, you know, I could bring this up in the meeting, and if your case isn't due soon, you know, I could give you more solid answers while bringing this up. And we're like, well, we've got to present a little bit sooner than that, but we appreciate it.
He was so accommodating. He's like, I'm flying out Wednesday, but like if the afternoon you got time, we're like, it's okay, take your time, we'll meet up another day. It's no biggie. But he was so accommodating. That just tells you how willing the city is to work with you, right?
Very good.
So any other questions?
No, just
Can I go with you?
I hear you.
I've got a few cities you can go talk to. So.
Exactly.
It works every time.
Stalkers for hire.
Yes.
I wouldn't put it that way, but
Hey, stalkers for hire.
I definitely wouldn't put it that way.
We'll show up
But
wherever you need us to.
public relations is a good one.
There's
Yes.
a new business there. New business model going.
Yeah.
No more questions.
No more questions? Okay, well, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you for coming and presenting. So one of the things that was very clear is we're encouraged as people of the industry to see the talent, to see the energy that you bring and the skill sets that you're developing. So thank you very much for that. Both good presentations, appreciate that. Both lacked some on the cash flow projections and analysis, answering questions of what is it that the owner of this property, what's their goal? What do they want to accomplish? That is an underlying question that really needs to start the conversation, and then you build off of it from there. And because we didn't have, we're going to try to clarify some of that in our future programs to make sure that that's up front. We understand that you can only work with what you're given. We'll make that clearer, but that sets a baseline for what am I trying to accomplish here? What am I building towards? And so I think with that, you would have had to have done more financial analysis, or at least in some of the cases, we believe it was there, but we didn't see it. It wasn't presented and shown in a format that an investor would really want to look at and say, okay, I have confidence now that what I'm listening to is accurate. And so that's important, I think, overall. So again, very well done. We appreciate everyone's efforts and work in the presentation. It was very tight. It was very close. We had some internal conversations. It was not a unanimous decision either, and there was only 4 judges, so you can do the math. So this year's winner is UNT. Both of you did a great job of saying, how do we generate revenue? How are we going to accomplish getting the money needed to help solve the problem? There were 2 creative. If I was the building owner, I would do what almost anybody in the industry does and say, I'm going to take parts of your program and parts of your program, and I'm going to put them together and come up with a better program. So I think UNT was to sell off a portion. You guys were to develop a portion and maintain ownership of it. There was a little bit more clarity on the target of the marketing, on exactly who they're going to sell that to, how they're going to develop it, which led to a more targeting of the tenant mix and how they're going to grow that. Your presentation was a little bit unclear on exactly that target market and tenant mix, and that kind of is maybe what helped tip the scales to the UNT side.